niente, magnifique, c'est magnifique.
Ah, aussi.
On a toutes les deux des super cheveux, mais toi, t'es ginger lady.
No, I'm not ginger now. I'm, how to say it, Castanian brown.
Ah,
so,
sorry.
I was ginger. Oh, it's still a little ginger, but I guess once ginger, always ginger.
Yes, exactly. But I think it became now your personality. So I want to say again your name, please. I did rehearse it. So, with us today is Denitza Kostova Kucera.
Bravo. Excellent.
It's a good start.
Excellent.
So, my dear Denitza, how are you? How's going? Music, also.
No, it's all right. I mean, after these 4 months of doing very little, it was difficult for me. I mean, the first 2 weeks were euphoric because I slept a lot and drank a lot, and I was all like, celebrate life and all. And after 2 weeks, one does feel a bit, I don't want to say useless, but it is difficult to find. It's a new role. And it takes time to find it. I mean, I do have kids. I have 2 children and a husband, but still, it's not like I had to discover how to take care of them. But it was a challenge. And after that, I found my own. The violin, unfortunately, was not a very big part. I didn't practice very much. Only 2 weeks or so. But I did listen to a lot of music, and I discovered the art of being quiet, which I think is something we can all use sometimes.
We need it anyway. I mean, humans need the silence, and especially musicians, it's a part of our art, actually. So if you can't hear silence, you can't come with some sound which is born in with silence, right? So
yes, and it's also, I think that the music it's in the space between spaces. It's between the notes that we find our freedom to be ourselves. No, and maybe it's the same in life, that sometimes you have a pause or a fermata that you are stuck in, and perhaps it's good to enjoy it rather than fight.
I actually love very much the moments when in music is suspension of time, like small pause, and also it's important to applause, but I think it's good always to last a bit, couple seconds, but music is going away and after starts to clap, because we still feel like very in what's happening.
Yes, we were talking about the time that we need to wake up in a way to come back to ourselves, but I was also talking about, these days there are a lot of discussions about how much of oneself one can put in a performance, or if you talk about Bach or Brahms or Beethoven, everybody has 1,000 ideas what is right or what is wrong. I've always thought if it's convincing and if it's honest, even if it's not historically 100% correct, I'll buy it. But that's only because I like live concerts, precisely because they charge you with something that recordings don't. But I think it's really that the magical time, the freedom that one has between the notes, same as you have between the words when you read a book. When a thought is so strong that it echoes in your head and you need some time to proceed, to go on. And it's the same with music, and it's the same with life. And maybe it was not so bad at the end to listen to time.
Sure.
I don't know.
I think, well, of course, what's happened, and actually what's happening, still happening, is a very powerful push on our way to be, to exist, why we existing, what we're looking for, what is important, what is not so much important, because really like stop, like fermata.
It was, and in some way, I wonder, I mean, in many ways, one should know who one is. I mean, we are not 12. I mean, when you were a small child, one can say, but even as a small child, didn't you know? I kind of knew who I was. Maybe not when I was 6 or 7, but certainly by the time I was 10 or 15. But I think it's not about getting to know who you are. I think it's about accepting who you have become. And this is something, also it has to do with music, because one develops. The way I play today is not the way I played 10 years ago or 20 years ago. But I think it is it's a discovery. And getting older, it's an adventure. And getting, how can I say, discovering music anew, it's the greatest gift we have to give to ourselves and to the audience, because no one wants to hear the same Mendelssohn concerto played the same way 20 times. I mean, you wouldn't go to the concert. It's a kind of and it's not only about inspiration, it's about following your own personal development and mirroring it in your playing. But I think Corona, in that way, the whole crisis and the entire, it was not easy, because it was somehow I need the audience. I need the energy coming from the other side. You know, I also did a project with my quartet and with my friend Bent, with mics and, you know, microphone. Like in the year we had kind of like a beat, right? I mean, but the thing is, it's not the same thing as breathing and sitting next to someone and playing in a full concert hall. We get charged just as much as the audience gets charged, and it's also a matter of reciprocity. My teacher always used to say that you have to touch yourself before you can touch others, and I do believe firmly that the first moment of freedom and of it's touching yourself and feeling deeply within you, and then you can translate that further. It doesn't go the other way. When you only want to touch others, it's more of a how can I say, a role play, which is not very convincing. I think.
Well, you started to talk about your teachers. I actually, when I take a look and Google like a bit to see what find information about you, suddenly I have seen like very clearly three parts, like la forme tripartite life journey, let's say, till now. So it reminds me even a bit, you know, maybe you have read it because I know you speak perfectly Russian. It was a trilogy of Gorky, Childhood, Люди и мои университеты. Well, if not...
Я не читала, я что-то другого из Горки читала. Подожди, я забыла. Да, ну я всегда Булгаковой очень обожаю. Я обожаю Булгаков. Еще, ну, и Сенин, как всегда, и Пушкин, ну, мне и Ахматова, и все. Ну, я все, ну, Булгаков как-то мне действительно очень нравится.
Понятно. Ну, кстати, у Есенина есть цикл, где он же в какой-то момент находился в Баку, в пригороде Баку.
Да.
Вот эти все стихи Шаганы, ты моя Шаганы, вот это все. Это
точно, да, я помню.
Да, это
я читала.
В Азербайджане. Да. Okay, let's go back in English. So, the first...
Multiculti.
Yeah, because that's how we are, and actually I think this is a great thing about people now, because we have this amazing opportunity not only to learn the languages, but learn the cultures, going towards different cultures, mix it, accept or not accept, it's our question, but be open. This is wonderful. So I love it, and actually it's so beautiful. I mean, I enjoy every of my talks because it's always like challenging, and it's a journey, and it's opening of in front of me, and we spend the ideas. So it's really terrific, and I'm very, very happy you are here. So,
well, thank you for having me.
You started because you were born in Bulgaria, in Plovdiv, right?
I was born in Sofia. In Sofia, but I lived, after the death of my parents, I lived with my grandparents in Pazarjik, which is a small town next to Plovdiv. So I went to Plovdiv for music school, but I didn't live there until age 11. But I did after.
Okay.
So it's a bit...
So I changed my phrase. Let's say your music journey starts there.
Yes. Sorry.
I catch myself. No, I just changed it. Don't be sorry. So, and so you went to the school. You have, I understood, apparently it was one of the very most important violin teachers, right? Tatiana
Kostova. Yeah. She was I loved her. I mean, she passed away, unfortunately, last year. 2 years ago now. My God, time flies. But she was really like my mirror. You know, the kind of mirror that is so honest that sometimes it hurts. You see all of your wobbly bits and all the bits that shouldn't be there, and all the pimples that normally with a nice lighting one can hide. But it was not negative. It was really an incredible... it's just facing yourself and what you can and what you cannot do. She was the most incredible teacher, and how can I say, maybe not teacher is not the right word, because it doesn't quite, I mean, yes, but teacher is, she's also a life coach.
Sure.
And a wonderful violin teacher, and she truly believed in me, but she pushed me very hard because I'm by nature very lazy. So that kind of bugged her a lot, but well.
So actually, I think now we lost a lot of the meaning of this word, the teacher, right? Because
Yes.
the teacher is not just only one who learns, open you some subjects or even music, but it's also someone who, for example, actually, who show you how to be to be musician.
Yes, and also I think yes, but I also think teacher is someone that you do honestly want to impress, or you want to show the person the absolute best that you can do. And when this person is not easily satisfied, that only dries up your own ambition to become better. See, my teacher in so many years, she was not very complimentary. I mean, the one thing she said when I would play well, be like, okay, that wasn't too bad. And you know, of course, as a small child, you wish for, oh wow, you were great, and blah, blah, but there was none of that false niceness in her. And I learned I'm not a very romantic, or how to say, I don't require the kind of false niceties from people. In a way, it bothers me. I would rather have the unvarnished truth, and she always gave it to me, sometimes in a painful manner, but I learned, and she also taught me something that I think is the most important thing, is to hear what comes out in the moment, not what you think comes out, because we all have an idea of what we want to present with a certain piece. You have it in your head, and sometimes when you play, you don't listen to the actual sound, you listen to your own idea in the head, which is not really honest. Which is why many times when we hear recordings of ourselves, we are surprised. Half of the time you think, oh, that's not me, I played much better. So I think it's very important to distance oneself in a way to become, I wouldn't say cold, but clinical. To know what actually comes out from you at this moment. Not your idea, but the actual music that you're producing. And she taught me that mercilessly. And for this, I'm also very grateful for her. In a way, how I learned to use my body. We all have different bodies. Longer arms, shorter arms, broader shoulder, smaller shoulder. You have to learn to use your body so you don't harm it. And she was an innovator in that, because in Bulgaria we didn't have Alexander technique or Tauman technique at that time. It was the teacher's responsibility to teach the student to use their body, like when you do staccato, spiccato, sautier, to know exactly which tendon, which vein. She used to draw on my arm with markers, so I knew which parts of my body I had to use to produce a certain thing. And this was incredibly original at the time. And so, to knock on wood, to this day I had no problems. I mean, I play sometimes 9 hours a day, and you know how many people have tendonitis and tennis elbow and pain in the back, and I don't know what else. It is extremely important for a young child to learn how to use their body in the best possible, most relaxed way. Of course, it's not a very natural movement, playing a violin, but it's neither writing on a paper or kicking a ball all day. One just has to do it correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful. And so, if I understood right, so after you win something great happening, you have a scholarship, right? And you go to the States. And here, your teacher, I checked it, so he is also one of disciples of Tatiana Kostova. So somehow continue in this tradition, right? So.
Yes, but I think he took a lot of, he took everything. I mean, the beginning, of course, and the basis from Tatiana Kristeva, but he later on studied with Wallerstein, and he took a lot from him. So when I started studying with Todor Pelev, I had mostly a mixture between my own teacher and Mr. Wallerstein, with whom I ended up studying for my master's. He, to me, is the most genius artist that I've ever really had the pleasure and the honor of working with. But it was a very interesting. Also, at the same time, I had coachings with Lipset, who was quite a famous professor in USC in Los Angeles, and he was a very Americanized, kind of a burly, bear style, you're bigger than the world, which I didn't really took a lot from him, for the simple reason that I didn't need it. Like, I always had a big sound, so somehow it is always a challenge for me to make a certain color, not to overpower the brass, you know. But he was very useful for somebody who had, let's say, a smaller sound, or not a way to project, but it was interesting. Anyway, it was a different, one has to take, it's like you drink a bit from every kind of spring, and at the end, hopefully you are hydrated and bouncy and yeah.
I see. And actually, you continued. Well, if I have read what you did, what was your achievements in the States. So you stayed there exactly a decade, I guess. So, and it was you made recordings. You worked like in different orchestras. You continued your studies. You played in orchestras. So it's quite amazing, and it's a lot of energy. Well, I'm not surprised. Can you just describe a bit this period? How you lived it? What was your dreams there? What is it? Can we say it was some kind of American dream? You did it? I don't know. Tell me.
I don't know about an American dream. I think my dream was to leaving Bulgaria was not, how can I say, being in America freed me. It made me know myself better and be less afraid of my own shortcomings. America in 1991 was very different from America today. People were extremely open and generous, and I have never seen so many kind and willing to help me, not only financially, but in the simple way of, I went to a boarding school for 2 years, and during vacation times, I had nowhere to go for the simple reason that Bulgaria was too far. Coming from LA, it took like 3 days to travel. So there were a lot of wealthy people in Beverly Hills, in around LA, who took us in, all the poor students, or how to say, the ones who couldn't go home. And they gave us keys to their houses and to the cars. I couldn't even drive, but it was a kind of openness that I was not really used to. And then I traveled a lot, because whenever you win a competition, you end up playing a concert, and you can go to another place and meet more people, and so on and so forth. But during my high school, I think the biggest eye-opener for me was finding my friends. It's the core of friends that to this day, one lives in Kaohsiung in Taiwan. He's also a violinist, and he was like my brother. I mean, I don't have a brother, but if I did, it would be him. And the other one is Joanna. She's an architect and lives currently in New York. So we are still very close to, we still see each other all the time, and we met as children. We were all 17, 18 years old, so in a way we grew up together. And then during my 4 years of my bachelor's in Oberlin, it was a different kind of dream. Then I kind of, I played a lot of competitions, a lot of concerts, and this was more of a maturity when I started to come, in my own shoes, so to say. There I started with Mr. Gabora, and later on when I was concertmaster in Montgomery, it was more about working with people and getting used to the South, which is a crazy, wonderful place that is often misunderstood. But people talk about, of course, the marches, Martin Luther King speeches, but the modern South, it is not the same. Today, there are wonderful people, some of them very open and very well traveled. Others are, of course, stuck in the past and, frankly said, a bit short-sighted. But so are we all. In any town, one can find the short-sighted idiots, unfortunately. Sorry to say. But then, I mean, it was a different journey. America was just coming. I was very happy there. I had 3 distinct periods. The last one was in Cleveland when I started with Mr. Wallenstein, and that from professional point of view, it was really the most satisfying. And I had a lovely group of friends. That's where I also met my husband. But I think it is, for me, America will always be home. Whenever I land in Cleveland, I'm home. And the smell of LAX, there's something to do with smell. Also the smell of the sea in Half Moon Bay or Northern California, I feel at home. The same way as I feel at home in front of my building in Bulgaria, where it smells like coal in the winter. And it's the smell of coal that suddenly you're not 40-some-year-old, you are 6 again. And I have the same kind of feeling when I go back to LA, San Francisco and Cleveland. This is my 3 that I would consider really where I feel myself the most at ease and at home. I was very happy there, and I learned a lot about music and a lot about people and a lot about bravery. Because I learned that to succeed and to do anything worthy, one has to be brave enough to open the door. That somehow there were many stressful situations during these times. I didn't have an American pass. So I remember I was once in Vancouver, and I was waiting for my passport to come from the Italian embassy, and I had to leave on that day, or else I would have lost my US visa. And it was just a crazy period when every day you just didn't know if you could leave the country at all. And the passport came on the same, I think it came at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and the last ferry left at 5. So luckily there was a nice man who drove me to the ferry, otherwise I couldn't have left the country and gone to Italy. But there were such stressful situations that are now, fortunately, not anymore like that. I mean, we all have now we are free to travel. Then travel was not quite so easy coming from the Eastern Bloc. I mean, and one had to fight for it. And every time when you had to re-enter the US, you had to go to Toronto or Vancouver to obtain another US visa. It was a very strange system. But somehow, I think one also learns to fear less if one goes through this kind of traumatic and almost unfortunate days when you think, God, I wish there was a hole. Could I just open up and I could just jump in it? And sometimes there's hopelessness to it. But I believe that it teaches us, whenever you go through a hopeless swamp, I think it's I guess we are lighter than we think. We always end up swimming on top, At least I would like to believe that. It's like Shrek a bit, He made it quite nice, the swamp. I mean, I would visit him. So I think it was an interesting, very interesting period in my life, and I do miss my friends to this day, some of them.
I understand. Denitza, well, you know very well, I imagine, the system of classic music, let's say, in the States, because you lived in this life there. Can you say what is different if you compare it with European? And actually, why I ask it, because of this crisis, this pandemic situation, I know that in the States a lot of orchestras living hard times, and they have even whole seasons which is annullated. And I don't know if because I know in Europe musicians are more protected, right? They have
yes.
So, but how is there? How do you have? Can you say? Maybe you know some about what's happening now with them? How they?
Well, I mean, it's difficult. It depends on how much the orchestra has in their fund, in their savings. Because in the US, unfortunately, most orchestras are not supported by the state. They're supported by private donors. And with this corona, of course, the private donors shrink and they're afraid of their own well-being. So a lot of them withdraw their support. And as a result, musicians can't get paid. Or, I mean, we saw the Met has closed until January and New York Phil too. And they were not getting paid, which I find is criminal because, I mean, these people, they do have to survive somehow. I mean, I don't know. I never played I played in small orchestras and I did mostly solo concerts when I was in the US. So I'm not very, I don't know how exactly the system works. Like in Cleveland Orchestra, I have friends who play in Cleveland or in Boston or in San Francisco, and I believe that they are, for the moment, they're okay in Cleveland and in San Francisco, but they don't know for how much longer. I assume the unions there are different. They are strong. There are musician unions as well. We all had to pay fees. But I don't know. I think the biggest difference between Europe and the US is just the state support. Like Lucerne, the symphony orchestra here is supported 80% by the state and only 20% by the employer during this very difficult time, which gives us the ability to survive, because one has to, what else could you do? Some of us could, of course, teach, but it is difficult to find new students if you had 100% orchestra job before. It's just a matter of numbers, really. And in the US, it's a bit more chaotic and it's really privately owned. And I am afraid a lot of my freelancer friends, they have a horrible time now. They have absolutely no, I have to say that in Switzerland, my quartet was supposed to play in Murten. We were supposed to play there 2 months ago. And because the concert was postponed, they sent us 500 francs just to help us. They didn't have to send us this money since we didn't play the concert. And anyway, we get it next year. We will play a concert then. But I just found it so incredibly generous and kind from this festival to send us anyhow. It is not a big sum of money, but it is big enough. And especially if you don't have any income during this Corona time, it can be incredibly helpful. I haven't heard of any such stories in the US. I don't know. In the moment, it is it's quite a challenge. I don't know how they have to reorganize the private and the government sector. I believe it has to be a little bit also more transparent. There was a big problem in Florida. Last year, I have a friend who works there, and he said that the orchestra would hire new people, like tutugers, like substitutes, and they wouldn't pay them. And then they would hire new substitutes and not pay them as well. And they could go like that for the whole season, which I find criminal, and they were not held accountable. There are some things that should be more transparent, and I believe that the government government sector has to simply support the arts more. But seeing who is at the White House, how can I say? I don't really see that happening unless we all put on banana belts and start doing the hula dance. He might support that. But I just don't see how, unless the whole system is more oriented towards helping the arts. At the end, I find it also a criminal that most American children going to public schools don't have an access to, here there are some music schools in Switzerland that cost very little. So every child can indeed go and have maybe it doesn't matter that you become a virtuoso violinist, but you will learn how the violin works, and you can hear other children playing the violin, and one can, I think there's someone, like tomorrow I'm going with my daughter and the entire violin class, we are going to walk around the neighborhood and play just the children play a couple of songs for the neighbors, and I think it's such a wonder. It costs nothing, all that it costs is 10 people that are willing to walk for about half an hour and perform something they've learned anyway, which I think it is very important that public schools should be supported with greater funding from the government. This is my impression that I had when I was living I was lucky enough to study in private schools and had full scholarships, but from some child coming from a very poor family, it is almost impossible to get to CIM. How? It costs 35,000 per year. Who has this money? I mean, I think it is criminal to filter people, and then suddenly the rich have better education and the poor have worse education, and then we get more polarization.
Yeah, but maybe well, I'm pretty sure it's not just lo hasard. It's something which was thinking. That's how now they say that classical music is not for everyone. It's just a small part of society. We don't need it. Because I think the arts and classical music and the music, actually the good music, really big music, I don't know how to say it, but great music, it's something which make higher human spirits, which open the heart and give us a different way to perceive and to feel, to be able to feel directly something, to understand deeper maybe. And unfortunately, what we see is mostly like a lot of, well, not all of them, hopefully, I hope so, but a lot of people now we see they don't have any, any empathy or any sensibility. It's a big part, not all of them, some of them.
But I think it's really about digestion, We are used to being fed pre-digested foods. It's simply we eat purees because we don't want to chew. I mean, reading a good book, you have to use your minds. So in a way, it's a lot of effort, yes. Seeing Jackie Chan, I like Jackie Chan, I'm not dissing him, but it doesn't involve a lot of brain power. I mean, also reading Proust is one thing, and reading, let's say, Daniel Steele is a totally different thing. I think simply we have gotten a bit lazier. When I was a younger child, we didn't have a lot of books. Sometimes I remember one night I read Emily Dickinson, and it was a wonderful translation. At the time I couldn't speak English, and I remember I copied the whole book by hand because I couldn't buy the book. But how often do you hear now of children who just copy a book? The parents would get it for them and they'll lose it on the second day. We have a very different idea of fun. And I don't know if I want to separate music into classical music, or to me, good music is good music, regardless. Classical, reggae, I mean, to be honest, I listen to a lot of jazz and a lot of old jazz in the car, and Nina Simone is one of my favorites. I listen to her as much as I listen to the Cleveland Quartet with Wallenstein. And I believe that when something is good, regardless of genre. And also,
real music. It could be folk music. Ravi Shankar is wonderful. Ethno music, jazz. When it's really something
great.
Genius there, sure. Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, because time is running, and last time I was talking so much, and I just missed the end. So, oh my God. Yeah, but I wanted to ask you. So it seems like it was pretty cool all in States, but why suddenly you took decision and you come to Europe? Why you go to Switzerland? And because I have seen that when you arrived in Switzerland, you didn't go directly to Lucerne. You work in different orchestras in Tonhalle, in Zurich, and also Ad Libitum, if I pronounce right.
Arau, yeah, it's small. Listen, it was not my choice. In a way, I met my husband in Cleveland and he got a job in Bern. And we were together for 2 years. He said, come with me. And at the time, I had a quartet in Cleveland, a quartet that I loved very much. And we went to Ravinia and we won quite a few things. But then it was financially very difficult because I didn't have much money. The violist was very poor. And anyhow, the only way to make a living as a quartet is to have a residency. And most residencies are filled until the quartet or the ensemble retire. So it's difficult to find a space for yourself, in order to survive by just doing chamber music. And that was exactly the moment when my husband said, come to Bern. And it was a chance to start from zero. In a way, it was hard because I've never been to Switzerland before. I didn't speak German and I spoke French, but we lived in the German part, which didn't help much. So, however, I came full of love and full of kind of excitement. I've always liked new beginnings. I think new beginnings keep us young and I think they keep us humble. Because to go back to the beginning, one has to find the part of yourself that is not, sometimes one loses, when you're no longer comfortable, you're no longer in your own waters. And I believe it's good to learn to swim in foreign rivers. It is good for our minds, for our hearts. And I have to say I learned a lot about myself as a European by coming, because I was born in Bulgaria, raised in Bulgaria, but I have never been to Western Europe. Where? We couldn't travel there either during my childhood. So I went to Moscow, that's it. I've never been anywhere else. So coming to Switzerland was somewhat of a shock, and I did work in Aarau for 1 year, for a semester, and then in Tonhalle 2 years. And then I got my position here in Lucerne, but I also was a member of this Alpha ensemble, which is the chamber music, and now I have my quartet, Vector, in concert with my orchestra job at LSO. But I think it was, I learned a lot about people coming here. And I learned a lot about myself because I struggled quite a lot with learning German. It was not easy for me, but I had no choice. So I had to kind of, sometimes in life, when life gives you lemons and so on. But besides it, so this is why I came, because of my husband.
I see. And so